出動だね、パプリカの。
氷室君の夢に時田君を助け出すためにはそれしかありません。
バッチリだ。よく聞こえてるよ。異常はないかね。
この夢はとってもデンジャラス。万一敦子に異常があったらすぐに覚醒措置をお願いね。
もちろんだ。しかし大丈夫かね。氷室君に接触したために時田君は。
私は誰
？In a world overflowing with movies, we need a hero. Someone to separate the bad from the good.
Sounds like a job. Verbal dioramas. Watches all the movies from comedy to drama. From the top roll sound. And don't forget the action. She'll watch until the end and then she'll give you her reaction. Movies you know, movies you don't. Prequels, sequels, remakes, and trivia and outtakes. Movies you know, movies you don't. Interesting stories, all the categories.
Hi everyone, I'm Em and welcome to Verbal Diorama episode 329, Paprika. This is the podcast that's all about the history and legacy of movies you know and movies you don't. That's the girl of your dreams. Sorry, I mean the girl in your dreams. Welcome to Verbal Diorama. Whether you're a brand new listener, whether you're a regular returning listener, thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing to listen to this podcast. There are so many podcasts out there that are vying for your ears and for your attention. And I am so happy to have you here for the history and legacy of Paprika, or Paprika, however you pronounce it. And if you are a regular returning listener, thank you so much for continuing to come back and listen to this podcast. I could not do this podcast without your constant support. And I have been doing this podcast for almost 7 years now. We are so close to the 7th birthday of this podcast. And honestly, it blows my mind that you guys continue to support this podcast. It really genuinely means so much. And I still can't believe that I've been doing this podcast for almost 7 years. That's 7 years of my life doing histories and legacies of movies you know and movies you don't. And yeah, it's crazy, isn't it, really? You could very much say this podcast is a dream for me. But before we go into all of that, welcome once again, or welcome if you've not been here, to the 6th annual animation season. Previous episodes this season have been on Monsters, Inc. And the last episode was on K-pop Demon Hunters. And if you don't know me or this podcast very well, you should know that I'm a huge fan of animated movies. And it's something that I believe more podcasts should genuinely talk more about animated movies. And what animation season is, it is a celebration of animation in all of its forms. So the traditional 2D hand-drawn stuff, stop motion, CGI, and a mix of all of the above. The Verbal Diorama animation season mantras are as follows. Animation is not just for children. And I mean, if any movie this season is going to tell you that animation is not just for children, it is this one. Animation is also not a genre. Animation is the perfect art form. And one of the reasons why I wanted to feature this movie is the director of this movie was so passionate about animation, about the fact that you can depict anything and anyone, and this movie does. Animation, you have no limitations like you do in live action cinema, such as things like gravity. There's nothing like that in animation. And that's why I think animation season is so important. It's so important to me, and it's so important to this podcast to highlight movies like this, because a lot of people have seen K-pop Demon Hunters and a lot of people have seen Monsters, Inc. But I don't think a lot of people have seen Paprika. And the thing is Satoshi Kon only made 4 films in his lifetime. And this was his final one. And it's so wildly ambitious, and it shows him at his most creative. And it is something that could only work in animation, because nothing portrays dreams like this movie portrays dreams. What is real? What is reality? Here's the trailer for Paprika.
1, 2, 3.
In the very near future, a group of brilliant scientists have created a machine that can control our dreams. But now, the device is missing. To solve the mystery and save humanity, she must stop the dream terrorists from altering our minds. From Satoshi Kon, the acclaimed director of Perfect Blue and Tokyo Godfathers, comes a visionary tale that crosses the line between reality and imagination. Paprika.
With a revolutionary device called the DC Mini, psychiatrists are now able to enter a patient's dreams in a therapeutic setting. But when an unknown assailant steals the devices and uses them to enter people's minds to enact mind control, chaos ensues as dreams begin to bleed into reality, and the thin line between the conscious and the unconscious begins to blur. Dr. Atsuko Chiba is assisted by Detective Toshimi Konakawa, a man playing with his own demons, and by her dream world alter ego Paprika to identify the thief as they ward off attacks on their own psyches. Let's run through the cast. I'm not going to talk about the English voice cast for this movie because, generally speaking, in the subs versus dubs debate, my perspective always is, I don't care if you watch a movie like this with subs or dubs as long as you watch the movie. However, I really do feel like the subtitled version of Paprika is the definitive version of Paprika. It's the only version I've ever seen, and I own this movie on DVD, and I don't even know if there is an English dub on the DVD. But this is a movie you have to pay attention to. And so when you're actually watching this movie and you're reading the subtitles, you have to pay more attention than if you are listening to the dubbed version, where people have a habit of getting their phone out. Trust me, I am the worst for getting my phone out and going on IMDb and looking up facts about movies while I watch them. It is literally one of the worst things about me is that I do that. But with a movie like Paprika, where you have to watch it and you have to read the subtitles, you concentrate on it a little more. So I'm only really going to focus on the Japanese cast of this movie. But to be honest, however you watch this movie is great because you're watching this movie. We have Megumi Hayashibara as Dr. Atsuko Chiba and Paprika, Toru Furuya as Dr. Kosaku Takita, Toru Amori as Dr. Seijiro Inui, Katsunosuke Jori as Dr. Torotaro Shima, Akio Otsuka as Detective Toshimi Konakawa, and Koichi Yamadera as Dr. Morio Onasai. Paprika has a screenplay by Seishi Minakami and Satoshi Kon. It was directed by Satoshi Kon and based on Paprika by Yasutaka Tsutsui. So, to start, pronunciation. Just like last episode on K-pop Demon Hunters, I am always trying to pronounce things properly, especially things like names. But I apologise in advance if I don't. The one thing I have taken some advice on is the pronunciation of Satoshi Kon. So previously, in other episodes of this podcast, I pronounced his name Satoshi. But, as with most things anime, I tend to bow to the expertise of a podcast called Ghibli Tech. And in their Satoshi Kon season, which is called Chronology, They specifically pronounce it Satoshi. So that's what I'm going to do going forward. Also, their chronology season is great and well worth a listen. So if you've never listened to Bibliotech, please have a listen to their podcast because their Satoshi Kon season is wonderful. When Satoshi Kon passed away from pancreatic cancer in 2010, he was only 46 years of age. But he had already amassed a perfect catalogue of 4 critically acclaimed feature films and 1 television series as his lasting legacy. Perfect Blue was his feature-length directorial debut, and it's about as accomplished as a perfect debut can be, with its clear references to Hitchcock, Lynch and Scorsese. Paprika was his final film. There's only 9 years between them, and they're the bread to the filling of Millennium Actress in 2001, Tokyo Godfathers in 2003, and the TV series Paranoia Agent in 2004. Satoshi Kon had been an assistant to Katsuhiro Otomo after starting out as a manga artist in his college years. Otomo created Akira, both the original 1982 manga and the 1988 film adaptation, often cited as one of the greatest anime movies ever made. I certainly think so. It's one of my favourites. I have done an episode on it in the past. A long time ago. It is episode 28. In 1992, Kon worked as a scriptwriter, layout artist, and background designer for the Koji Morimoto directed Magnetic Rose, which was one of 3 short films in Katsuhiro Otomo's omnibus Memories, which was released in 1995. And Magnetic Rose's themes of blending fiction and reality would be something that became prevalent in Kon's work going forward. In Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, Paranoia Agent, and Paprika, the boundary between fiction and reality gradually becomes blurred. Tokyo Godfathers is really the only one of his movies that's more grounded in reality. Satoshi Kon wasn't just a director, nor was he just an anime director. He actually set out to make genre-defining animation. He loved the medium of animation so much, and he believed it was the only way these works could be portrayed. Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, Tokyo Godfathers, Paprika, and the TV show Paranoia Agent made it clear he wanted to do something different. He wanted animation to show the messiness of life, to show imperfections and horror, as well as beauty and fantasy. Tokyo Godfathers is very much a Christmas movie, so maybe I'll schedule that one for a future Christmas. Kon was bold and distinctive. He valued the story as much as he valued visuals. My point is that he was an animation pioneer, taken far too soon. He originally wanted to make Paprika straight after Perfect Blue in 1998, which he'd made with production company Madhouse. Madhouse was founded by Masuo Maruyama, a film producer and considered one of the most experienced in the Japanese animation industry. He's responsible for the careers of not only Satoshi Kon, but also Academy Award-nominated director Mamoru Hosoda. The 1998 version of Paprika wasn't going to be made with Madhouse, but with the producer who financed Perfect Blue. That company, Rex Entertainment, then went bankrupt, and Kon instead went on to make Millennium Actress and Tokyo Godfathers. Due to the small scale of their releases, both Millennium Actress and Tokyo Godfathers had a hard time recouping their investment funds. But by then, Kon's name had become so well known in the film industry, by the time of his next project, which would be Paprika, his reputation had already been established, so that actually helped the film get produced. Now, Paprika had started life as a novel, and it had actually originally been published in Marie Claire, Japan, in 4 parts, each appearing chronologically in January 1991, March 1992, August 1992, and June 1993. A manga adaptation of the novel was created by Reiji Hajiwara in 1995, but that actually wasn't published until 2003. It would be 2003 before Paprika would pop back up in Satoshi Kon's radar when he met with the original novel's author Yasutaka Tsutsui. When the two men met, Kon was in production on the TV series Paranoia Agent with Madhouse, and they were thinking on a project that they could realistically begin developing after the completion of Paranoia Agent. Kon had been a huge fan of Tsutsuy's novels, including Paprika, and he was fascinated by the sense of the fluctuating relationship between dreams and reality. He'd already depicted similar themes between the blurring of fantasy and reality in Perfect Blue and Millennium Actress, but he felt a strange connection to the themes of Paprika. He would say that he learned from Satsui's works to question the framework of common sense. The situation between Perfect Blue and Paprika couldn't be more different. Kon rejected the original screenplay for Perfect Blue by the novel's original author Yoshikazu Takeuchi. Takeuchi agreed to allow Kon to change the plot within limits and to assign a new screenwriter to the project, choosing Sadayuki Murai and working closely with him to perfect Perfect Blue. For Paprika, Kon has always said he would not have made the film without author Yasutaka Satsui's blessing, and meeting Satsui cemented the idea in his mind to make Paprika. Unlike Perfect Blue, where Kon made fundamental changes, he saw Paprika as too voluminous to fit into one film, and that too much time had passed since his publication, and many other creators had used the ideas and imagery from the original book. So instead, he took most of the ideas from the novel, as well as Satsui's other novels, and used them to fit into a 90-minute story where he created new images to visually express dreams without explanation. He would say in a 2007 interview with Cine Fantastique, quote, "To me, the film Paprika is not simply an adaptation of the original novel, but also an homage to Satsui's work," unquote. When it came to adapting the story, and specifically the depiction of dreams, or indeed nightmares, Kon wanted to avoid the typical dark imagery of nightmare scenes. Instead, he chose a bright and colourful parade. He wanted something so cheerful that it was creepy, and the parade, with its bright oranges, reds, golds and greens, is probably the one singular image that not only sums up this movie, it's the imagery everyone instantly remembers, because it's so bold and visceral. He decided this parade, which wasn't present in Satsui's original novel, would be the dream that flows into the real world at the climax, and that the parade would follow its own journey, from the desert where it starts, through to the city where it ends and merges into the real city. The parade features a variety of objects, including religious items like shrine gates and Buddhist statues, traditional Japanese images like beckoning cats and Daruma dolls, and also cars and home appliances, and also, bizarrely, a parade of frogs. Most of these items were selected based on the criteria of discarded objects. Kon wanted to use this as an example of religious significance diminishing in the modern era and consumerism, that traditional religious items and customs have lost their original meaning and then become items people just use to decorate their homes. He depicted fridges and toasters to signify the period of economic growth and the idea that people will happily replace their working appliances with brand new versions without thinking of the economic and environmental cost. This stream of random objects depicts how, in our unconscious mind, contains multiple thoughts and ideas, from our mundane thoughts of ordinary objects, our hobbies, to myths, religion, science, modern culture, and ideologies, which stir and blend together in a chaotic and abstract way within our dreams. Because dreams contain no logic, even you are not yourself in dreams. Kon liked to write with pictures rather than words, so instead of using traditional scripts, he used meticulous storyboards to construct the structure, creating lengthy sections with ambiguous transitions. Character designer and animation director Masashi Ando, best known for his work on Princess Mononoke and later Your Name, art director Nobutaka Iki, writer Seishi Minakama, and composer Susumu Hirasawa, whose sound defined Kon's films as much as the visual style, were the same core collaborators he'd used for years. And with a relatively modest budget of around 300 million yen, or around $2.6 million, this team used traditional 2D and CGI as a hybrid animation style and compositing technique to create the parade. This was born not only from visual concepts, but in direct collaboration with Susumu Hirasawa's music. Satoshi Kon used repetition, layering, and managed chaos to create overwhelming movement without exhausting the animation team. The result is one of the most recognizable dream sequences ever animated, and also one of the most beautiful, The animation in that scene is absolutely stunning. The whole production was not an easy one. Paprika took 2.5 years from planning to completion and makes use of 3D modelled environments in many subtle places. And it's worth noting that human beings and characters are never rendered in 3D models. Paprika is a great example of traditional hand-drawn anime that relies purely on the hand-drawn aesthetic, but also Satoshi Kon and Madhouse were specifically strategic about when and where to use CG. They primarily used it for specific elements that would be extremely difficult or time-consuming to animate by hand. Things like complex mechanical movements, architectural elements, crowd scenes, and certain dream sequences where reality needed to feel distorted or uncanny. The key was that CG was used as a tool to enhance the hand-drawn animation, not replace it. Satoshi Kon saw this as experimenting with a technique that he saw would become even more prevalent in the future. And wouldn't you know, he was right about many things. And Satoshi Kon, during his lifetime, seemed to be one of these directors that could easily predict the future, not just within the animation industry itself, but also in the wider world. The core themes Kon focused on in this film were the duality, multifacetedness, contrast, and the balance of things. And the most prominent duality in Paprika is between the heroine, Atsuko Chiba, and Paprika. Kon saw the characters as a person's inner conflict, but also as two distinct individuals, seeing Atsuko as a straight-laced young woman who follows social norms and suppresses her feelings and desires, and Paprika as emotional and unrestrained. The differences between the two leads to a split, which then leads to the final version, a mix of Atsuko and Paprika together, a mature version of the two. And in a movie full of great ideas, Atsuko and Paprika are one of the best, in that everyone has these multiple facets to their personalities. Atsuko struggles between who she wants to be and who she feels she ought to be. Paprika is the completely unrestricted version of herself, but that version only exists in the dream world, and the conflict comes from Atsuko's inability to embrace that version in reality. Because in a fairly repressed nation like Japan, a young woman really can't be sexually free and a powerful entity in her own right. But as Paprika, she can be all of that and more. Satoshi Kon needed a voice actor who could convincingly play both characters, while make them distinct and different. Megumi Hayashibara had had a lot of famous roles under her belt, from Hello Kitty in Hello Kitty, Faye Valentine in Cowboy Bebop, Jessie in Pokemon, Lena Inverse in Slayers, and Rei Ayanami in Neon Genesis Evangelion. Kon specifically chose voice actors who were well known and who fit the characters' images. But then the characters also have these dual identities. Detective Konakawa wanted to be a filmmaker, but ended up in the police after the death of his friend, and the resulting repressed memories and trauma of witnessing a murder. Dr. Kosaku Tokita is a gifted inventor. The inventor of the DC Mini is somewhat an eternal child, refusing to grow up and take accountability for his life. And there are many pieces on the internet that interpret Paprika through the perspective of Carl Jung's theories on psychology. Jung's approach to psychoanalysis is based on Sigmund Freud's long-standing theories that conscious human behavior can be explained by our unconscious drives, which often manifest in the forms of our dreams. Jung's theories were based around his model of the psyche, which consists of the ego, persona, shadow, anima and animus, and the self. The ego is your conscious self, your personality. The persona is the version of yourself that you project to the world. The shadow contains your repressed personality or character traits. The anima and animus are particular archetypal parts of the shadow. The anima consists of repressed feminine qualities of a man, while the animus consists of repressed masculine qualities of a woman. Jung believed that for one to become a complete version of oneself, one needs to integrate the unconscious elements of the psyche into the conscious self. The ego needs to confront and integrate the shadow and other unconscious elements of the psyche into itself. This completed version of oneself, once a person's conscious and unconscious elements have been united, is called the self. It's a representation of the psyche as a whole. Jung believed that dreams were the medium which the unconscious uses to communicate with us, which is why dreams are, frankly, weird, with no real sense of comprehension and are usually random, including random people, and often have no meaning. Psychologists believe that the nonsensical depictions of our dreams are meant to convey something meaningful, something silently unconscious. Much in Paprika's dream imagery is set around cinema, and that's no accident either. French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan's mirror theory is widely regarded as the central reference point for the emergence of psychoanalytical film theory, and this is where babies are involved. Lacan's theory stems from observing babies aged 6 to 18 months, who recognise their reflections in the mirror as a whole person, but as another person. Babies of this age will regularly mimic older children and adults as they develop an ego by assuming their mirror image is another human being. So when we see babies performing adult acts like cooking, cleaning, fixing their toys, or even looking after their own baby dolls, who they see as actual babies, we are able to see how babies' egos let them assume they are equal to adults. Using the infant's mirror as a foundation, Lacan goes on to show how the cinema screen is similar to the mirror. We might not see an exact reflection of ourselves on the screen, but we might come across characters who have characteristics that are similar to ours, that we feel like we can relate to, even though they're fictional beings, or characters we aspire to be like, or even characters who look like us. Representation is important, and seeing people of colour or any marginalised group on screen can elicit those feelings. That doesn't mean everything we see on screen is something we like or that we can relate to. Paprika contains some really creepy scenes as well as disturbing scenes, almost as if the bright colours mask the darkness within. Kon would say that sexual metaphor and metonymy were necessary as part of the plot, since dreams reflect suppressed sexual desires. Much in Paprika is metaphorical than literal. But there's a scene in particular which is an implied rape scene, where Morio Osanai puts his hand literally under Paprika's skin, starting at her abdomen, and rips it off her. He doesn't desire Paprika and Atsuko as a whole, but lusts after the more submissive Atsuko part, resulting in him forcibly extracting Atsuko from Paprika's body. Again, animation, not just for children. And the final shot of the movie, Konikawa, after literally facing his demons, finally makes peace with his past, and Paprika recommends he go to the cinema to watch a movie. Kon's own movies, Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, and Tokyo Godfathers are showing, but Paprika recommends Dreaming Kids, and Konikawa buys a ticket. This movie is full of movie imagery, and the idea of films being made of dreams. Dreaming Kids may not be real, but it would tease his next film, Dreaming Machine, set in a fanciful future with an all-robot cast, which was in production before his death. After his passing, production continued at Madhouse, where the team used Kon's directorial tapes and notes to guide them to complete the film, although the main works such as storyboards and script were already completed. In August 2011, Madhouse founder and producer Masayo Maruyama revealed that the production of Dreaming Machine had been cancelled due to lack of finances. 600 of the 1,500 shots had been animated. In August 2018, Maruyama revealed that the movie would never be completed or released in the foreseeable future, as there were no Japanese animation directors that could match Kon's level of ability. Paprika was Kon's dream project, and if you have to leave anywhere, leave on high. It was so satisfying that Kon called Paprika the final word in his reality versus... And now, a word from our sponsors, which is you, if you'd like to be. Thank you for listening to this podcast. It's completely independent, made by me, and relies on listener support. If you're enjoying this episode and the work I do, and if you want to support an indie podcaster, if you have some spare change, you can financially contribute to the upkeep of this podcast. You're under no obligation. This podcast is free and always will be. But there are a couple of ways you can help if you wish to and if you have the means to. You can make a one-off donation at verbaldiorama.com/tips, or you can subscribe to the Patreon to support the show monthly at verbaldiorama.com/Patreon. All money made goes back into this podcast by paying for software subscriptions, website hosting, and new equipment. Huge thank you for your continued support. Now back to the movie. Fantasy theme. But I often feel we'll always be left with a sense of what if? What if Satoshi Kon had lived? What else could he have done in his lifetime? What would he be doing right now? And I really genuinely feel like this was a director who only would have made bigger and bigger movies and more important movies in his lifetime. And I genuinely believe he would have won an Oscar at some point in his life. Speaking of Oscars, or indeed lack of Oscars, it's time to segue into the obligatory Keanu reference for this episode. And if you don't know what that is, it's where I try and link every movie that I feature with Keanu Reeves for no reason other than I really like the guy and I think he's great and he is the best of men. And this was a really interesting one, actually, because Keanu Reeves has actually starred in a rotoscoped animated version of Philip K. Dick's A Scanner Darkly, which is also about identity and deception, but it's also about drug addiction, so kind of not the same thing. A Scanner Darkly was directed by Richard Linklater, and it's well worth the watch, actually, if you're a fan of Philip K. Dick or Richard Linklater. It was also covered in episode 150 of this podcast. But this is probably the easiest way to link Keanu Reeves to this movie in particular. I've mentioned it a couple of times. The score for Paprika was composed by Susumu Hirasawa. And when Satoshi Kon was asked who the biggest influence on his visual style was, he chose Susumu Hirasawa's music. And Kon had been a fan of the composer for 20 years and loved his melodies, lyrics and vocals, but mostly how Hirasawa portrayed the coexistence of opposites, like myth and science. In many ways, Hirasawa's music defined Kon's films as much as his visual style did. Hirasawa built many of his instruments himself and used Amiga computers extensively in his work. The soundtrack for Paprika is notable for being one of the first film scores to use Vocaloid for vocals. It's also the last of Hirasawa's albums where an Amiga computer was used for composition. The world premiere of Paprika took place at the 63rd Venice International Film Festival on the 2nd of September 2006, followed by screenings at the 44th New York Film Festival on the 7th of October 2006, and the 19th Tokyo International Film Festival between the 21st to the 29th of October 2006, where it quickly gained attention as an art house anime. When Paprika finally was released in Japanese cinemas on the 25th of November 2006, it did so in just 3 cinemas in the Kanto region. Despite the limited release, it remained in cinemas for 8 weeks and gradually expanded through word of mouth. In the US, the film received a limited release on the 24th of May 2007. It was initially released in only 2 cinemas, one in New York City and one in Los Angeles, but it was gradually expanded to 37 screens. It eventually expanded to 80 art house cinemas, which was a rarity in the US for anime releases in the mid-2000s, let alone R-rated anime. Paprika would end up owning $882,267 in the US and $65,578 internationally, for a total worldwide gross, excluding Japan, of $967,432. It currently sits at 87% on Rotten Tomatoes, with a critical consensus of, following its own brand of logic, Paprika is an eye-opening mind trip that is difficult to follow but never fails to dazzle. Actor Elijah Wood is a fan of the movie. He praised it in an interview. Time included it in its top 25 animated films of all time. Time Out included it in its top 50 animated films of all time. Rotten Tomatoes included it in its list of 50 best animated films of all time. Newsweek included it in its top 20 films of 2007. Metacritic listed it among the top 25 highest-rated science fiction films of all time, and also the top 30 highest-rated animations of all time. And you'll be unsurprised to know that a live-action adaptation of Paprika has been in the works since the late 2000s. The first was supposed to be directed by Wolfgang Petersen. It was in development in 2009. That never went anywhere. In August of 2022, it was reported that Kathy Yan would direct and executively produce a live-action TV adaptation of Yasutaka Tsutsui original 1993 novel for Amazon. However, Amazon declined to comment, and it's not listed on Kathy Yan's upcoming projects on IMDb. So honestly, I don't think it'll ever happen, and I don't think it can happen, because I don't think any version of Paprika can be adapted into live action. Not successfully, anyway, and not as well as Satoshi Kon did it. So I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the elephant in the room, which is Christopher Nolan's 2010 sci-fi action movie Inception. And much of the online discussion surrounding Paprika often mentions Inception, and many critics and scholars note the similarities between the two movies. Similarities in plot, scenes, and characters. Some sources claim that Nolan has admitted Paprika's influence on Inception, but, bizarrely, there are no published quotes from the director confirming this. But Paprika is so much more than the blueprint for Inception. Kon was a filmmaker known for his dream logic before even truly tackling the subject of dreams. His way of editing his movies made them feel dreamlike, even if dreams weren't a part of the plot. Paprika, like all of his movies, is about identity, manifesting in dreams, and Inception is a dream heist. So yes, there are similarities between Paprika and Inception, but they are very different movies and they're very separate movies. And I don't really think that it's fair to Paprika to always talk about Inception. And I don't think it's necessarily fair for Inception to have people always talking about Paprika. They are very different. They just both happen to be set in dreams. Honestly, I prefer Paprika to Inception. I think Inception is a fine movie. I haven't actually done any Christopher Nolan movies on this podcast yet, so maybe Inception should be a future episode. But I really think it's unnecessary to compare them. They are so very different, apart from the corridor scene and apart from dreams. But even the corridor scenes are, yes, they're set in corridors, but they are very different scenes. But one similarity between Paprika and Inception that we can agree on is that both are fan favourite movies. Christopher Nolan fans really love Inception, and Satoshi Kon fans really love Paprika. Paprika is often referred to online as the trippiest anime ever made. And when we talk about animation that is not just for children, or that does offer something different to the traditional genre archetypes that we often see in animation, it's often mentioned alongside films like Akira, Spirited Away, and Ghost in the Shell. And to be honest, all of these movies are up there as some of the greatest animated movies ever made. Paprika was the first Satoshi Kon movie that I saw, and even after rewatches, I still don't understand it. And I probably never will, and that's fine. But sometimes the mark of a great movie is remembering it. And the images in Paprika are burned into my skull. There's a quote from the movie where Paprika says, "The internet and dreams are similar. They're areas where the repressed conscious mind escapes." 20 years ago, Satoshi Kon predicted keyboard warriors and rage bait. But in all seriousness, this is a movie ahead of its time. Like Perfect Blue predicted parasocial relationships, Paprika speaks of dreams, of being free of oppression in dreams, of being yourself, of identity, of sexuality and pure escapism. The sort of escapism movies and the internet give us. The sort of escapism I get from this podcast. Satoshi Kon was known for his editing and his imagery, and Paprika is a masterclass at both. The repeating motif of the parade, the flitting between dreams and the real world. This is a movie that can only be depicted in animation. A live-action version of Paprika simply wouldn't work. Sorry, Kathy Yan. Dreams have been depicted many times in live action, but Paprika's visuals are the key to its memorability. Inception's dream worlds are nothing like the bright, colourful, grotesque, unreliable, muddled, illogical, wonderful, I'm going to say it, cartoonish nature of our dreams. Personally, I've never dreamt about structured cityscapes. 2010 saw a further boom to Paprika's reputation, After the release of Inception in 2010, many viewers pointed out the similarities, which brought Paprika further into the mainstream film conversation. And then, a mere month later, the death of Satoshi Kon shone new light onto his works. Over time, Paprika became part of cinema retrospectives, academic discussions on surrealism, media psychology, and the nature of dreams. Paprika was studied in film schools, screened in museum theatres, and it's treasured by anime fans worldwide. It's also taken an active role in how Kon's career is remembered since his death. It's frequently regarded as the pinnacle of his philosophical and visual ideas, rather than his most approachable piece of work. Paprika demonstrates how far animation can describe dreamlike worlds without sacrificing narrative coherence, especially while working under commercial production limits. I don't think any movies portray as accurately the weirdness of our dreams that Paprika does. It's so special, and if you've not seen it and you've got this far in this episode, you really need to see it to fully appreciate all of this. I'm gesturing in the air, all of this. Because one of the things Paprika does best is invite engagement. If you have seen it, what do you think it's about? What did you take away from Paprika? What do you love about the movie? What do you not like about the movie? And I think this is why the movie has continued to endure, and this is why the movie is so popular, especially with internet communities and fan boards, because people love to talk about this movie. It means whatever it means to whoever watches it, and it means different things to whoever watches it. Many critics loved this movie, but one critic in particular stood out to me, and that was US Village Voice critic Rob Nelson. And he overall actually admired the film and its imagery. But his comment is really interesting because he said that it was not a movie that's meant to be understood so much as simply experienced, or maybe dreamed. And I think that's the best way to describe Paprika. A dream movie. Satoshi Kon's literal dream project, made by a dream director who loved animation so much, he made dream movies before he passed, and now somewhat exists only in dreams. Paprika, it's just a dream. Thank you for listening. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts on Paprika, and thank you for your continued support of this podcast. If you want to show your support in multiple different ways, you could leave a rating or review wherever you found this podcast. You could tell your friends and family about this podcast, or you can find me and follow me on social media, and you can share the podcast that way. I am at Verbal Diorama. You can share posts, like posts, comment on posts. It all helps really to get the word out there and to hopefully get other people to know this podcast and know what I've been doing. I genuinely love doing this podcast, and anything you could do to help would be so appreciated. If you like this episode on Paprika, I would also recommend the following movies and episodes of this podcast. I'm going to start with episode 77, which is a movie called Your Name. It's actually one of the more popular anime episodes that I've done on this podcast, and it's a beautiful movie, and I always like to recommend Your Name. And the other Satoshi Kon episode that I did, where I called him Satoshi Kon throughout the whole episode, that is episode 191, Perfect Blue, which is another remarkably prescient movie in so many ways when we talk about pop idols and actresses and celebrities and celebrity culture and parasocial relationships. It is all contained within Perfect Blue. It is such a fantastic movie. I would also highly recommend you watch that too. As always, give me feedback and let me know what you think of my recommendations. So the next episode of Animation Season, and Animation Season continues with 4 teenagers, immigrants to the US, living with their adoptive father, trying to find their place in a world that doesn't seem to like their kind. And they love pizza. 7 theatrical films about them had already been made, including the highest grossing independent film of all time at the time. This movie rebooted the 4 and for the first time cast actual teenagers in the roles. Oh, and did I mention they're turtles? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, to be exact. And Mutant Mayhem came out in 2023, seemingly out of nowhere, and was an absolute joy. 3D animated to look like a 2D painting. It's one of those movies you can cite as proving that CG animation doesn't need to look like CG animation. So join me next week for the history and legacy of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. A huge thank you to the amazing patrons of this podcast. To Simon, Laurel, Derek, Kat, Andy, Mike, Luke, Michael, Scott, Brendan, Ian, Lisa, Sam, Jack, Dave, Stuart, Nicholas So, Kev, Heather, Danny, Stu, Brett, Philip M, Zenos, Sean, Rhino, Philip K, Adam, Elaine, Kyle, Aaron, and Sebastian. If you want to get in touch, you can email verbaldiorama@gmail.com. You can also go to the website verbaldiorama.com and you can fill out the contact form. You can say hello, you can give feedback, or you can give suggestions. I would genuinely love to hear from you. You can also DM me on social media as well. I really love to hear from people, and I always try to respond as quickly as possible. I'm hugely grateful to you all for your support. And finally,
It's a show time!
今日のテレビは夢にのち晴れのち晴れ晴れ晴れ晴れ晴れ晴れ
昨日見た夢今日の夢
目がなるなる金のなる木を育てませいいえつぼみのうちが花
そんな不満を一票に託して入れてよこの目玉
誰が私かこの玉座
我こそが皇帝なり神が定めたのだ
わしはそんなこと定めておらん
神も仏も終身がえ売られる清のうさばらし売られる清のうさばらし
まだ夢を見てんのか。
ええ
bye.
Movies you